Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick unboxing and first look at the Sony CyberShot Rx100 Mark VII. Now, it's hard to believe that we are in our 7th generation of this camera, but we are, and at $1,200 US, it promises to be the best point-and-shoot camera money can buy, and for good reason. Every generation before it has been the best point-and-shoot camera on the market. And if you've ever wondered whether or not owning one of these is better than using a top-of-the-line smartphone camera, I can answer that in advance, and it's a resounding yes. This is a real camera. It may not be full frame, it may not be a mirrorless interchangeable lens APS-C or micro four thirds, but we have a solid 1-inch sensor complemented by a 24 to 200 millimeter Zeiss piece of glass, now 357 points of phase detection for your autofocus, borrowing much of the Sony A9 flagship autofocus system, real-time tracking that includes in video, of course, most importantly, real-time eye autofocus, not just for humans, but for pets as well, limitations on how many animals, blackout-free shooting. We can do 20 frames per second without any blackout. That means you're never going to be missing a shot. So giving the RX100 line a sports camera, basically a sports camera feel and capability. And now something many of you have been waiting for, a microphone jack. And of course, a 180-degree tiltable LCD for selfies, vlogging, all that stuff. And the 5-minute video cap still remains, however, you now have control over how hot you want it to get. So what that means is that, at least in testing that I've seen so far, you can shoot a lot more than 5 minutes if you're willing to put, I don't want to say the camera at risk, but let it get hot, maybe have it on or inside of a cage. I likely will pick one up. First and foremost, our wall adapter. I would have liked to have seen Sony move to Type-C, but this is not about dream cameras, it's about what we have access to. So that's how you're going to charge it, unless you have a dedicated battery charger, your wrist strap, your micro USB cable for charging. Of course, this has Wi-Fi and NFC like every generation before it. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the camera. See what else. We should have a battery in the box, and here are some attachments for the side if you want to use a strap, and then last but not least, the battery. Now, I would have liked to have seen a new battery type, but if sticking with the good old NP BX1 is the way we've got to go in order to keep the profile where it's at, which is as small as a Wonder could be when it comes to a camera of this quality, then I am not upset. I've got plenty of them, and if you're purchasing one of these, you're going to want a lot of them. So there it is. It looks a lot like every other RX100 before it, and for good reason. It is very much like every other RX100 before it, but critical improvements, most importantly, the autofocus and the ability now to capture 4K video for longer than 5 minutes. In terms of the feel, it all looks and feels a lot like the 6th generation. And the pricing, by the way, folks, isn't any different. $1,200 US is exactly what the 6th generation warranted. That was the street price. Only now is it less. It's now $1,099, so a $100 price drop, and it's still a fantastic camera. Of course, we have a flash. We have an EVF here on the left side. I don't think it will suffer from that slight diopter issue that the previous one did, where it would slide as you would eject it. Of course, as I mentioned, that tilting display, so that you can frame yourself. Granted, it's small, you still have it. And in terms of controls on the back, everything has stayed pretty much the same. Nothing really new here. You know, straightforward, standard business. Battery bay, SD card slot right there. Could they have given us a faster slot? Sure, they could have. Did they need to? Not really. So we've got a great EVF. Granted, it's tiny and, you know, not necessarily what most people are going to use with this camera. We have very good focal range. That's another thing that clearly differentiates this from any sort of camera on your latest gen smartphone. And also, the autofocus system. I mean, the real-time tracking is something you're only going to find right now in Sony's A9, A6400. These are cameras that are not in a point-and-shoot category. So that means when shooting video, your subject will stay in focus. When shooting stills, also because of the improvement in the autofocus system, you're going to see a gain. And here I've got the Rx100 Mark V, which I'm going to put right next to it for purpose of comparison. It does have the optional hand grip on it, so if you're wondering why it's got that bump out, now you know. And then here is the Rx100 Mark VI. Now, you can be certain I will be comparing all three of these. I've already compared the 5 and 6. Now it's all about 7. And 7 really just has so many features added to it. I mean, for many of you out there, the biggest feature really is this one, which I have not touched on, which is that microphone jack. And while I think the mic jack is important, I don't think that's what differentiates this camera. In fact, it never has, which is why it took until the 7th generation for it to become part of the package. Not to say Canon hasn't also pushed that in by including microphone jacks on their cameras. They have, but the fact of the matter is that Sony never had a problem selling the RX100 cameras. In fact, they sort of have become the bread and butter, or the actual standard for still wanting or owning a point-and-shoot camera, because if you want something better than a smartphone is going to deliver, this is exactly where you need to look. Time-lapse has been built into this. We still, of course, have the multi-port, which you use for charging, and other accessories, and HDMI out. It is clean HDMI out, no 10-bit. There is no Sony camera right now, consumer-wise, 10-bit capable. Got this still hanging open over here. But otherwise, the build, the look, the feel, all the same. So what is that big difference? I've already mentioned it. We've moved from the Rx100 Mark V over here, not having a 200mm lens. And a lot of people wish that they would have retained this, an ND filter like the 5A, but they have to understand Sony is pushing to differentiate away from smartphones. And the way you do that is deliver features smartphones don't have. And 200mm zoom lenses are things that smartphones don't have. Furthermore, the autofocus capability on this camera, that is something you will never see on a smartphone, especially real-time tracking like that. It's just not there. You're getting basically a glimpse, a taste of A9 sports shooting, bird shooting capability in something you can take anywhere. And the video that these cameras produce is simply fantastic. I mean, I don't even know why anyone would consider an Rx100 Mark II, which does have 4K internal recording, when for it's almost twice the price, you can step into a real camera. Granted, we're working with the same 1-inch sensor, but oh my God, just the features are much more rich on this. It's not comparable. I would never in a minute consider the Rx100 when this camera exists. Other things to note, it does now automatically record video and portrait. So if you're, an Instagram artiste, this camera is ready for you. And I think a lot of that is Sony paying attention to what people use their cameras for, which is something a camera manufacturer must do. And I know that they're going to continue to build on this. I mean, you see a culmination here of transitioning to the larger lens and now improving upon it. You got the bigger lens. You started off here with having both phase and contrast detection points. Then we got a longer lens. Now we have a longer lens complemented by a far superior, or at least on paper, the best autofocus system ever in a compact point-and-shoot camera. So combine that with, reduced limitations when it comes to 4K video recording. Combine that with the microphone jack that so many people drooled over. You pretty much have a camera that just about everyone should love, whether you're a YouTuber, a vlogger. I mean, you want to go out in the field, you want to be able to record yourself for your channel, or just record yourself with your family, friends, take pictures of your kids, grandkids. This camera can do it all. If you need more, you need more. Is the price high? Absolutely. Does it do things that no other $1,200 camera can do in this form factor? The answer is yes. So when people say to me, Ed, why is it so expensive? What is Sony thinking? clearly the camera's not made for you. That's my answer. If you understand that there is no camera on the market that directly competes with it, granted there are some nice little panties out there, the Panasonics, they still don't live up to this capability. Oh, and I forgot another important thing, which is probably one of the most exciting things for me, is that we have active steady shot in 4K video now, something that never existed, which means that with a little bit of cropping, it sounds wrong, with a little bit of cropping, you have stabilized 4K video without needing a gimbal. Now, I am getting ready to unbox a gimbal that is kind of designed for a camera just like this. In fact, it's the camera they kind of feature on the box. That'll be another video, another day. But the point I'm making here is that that is something that for me, I have waited for a long time, because even with that crop factor, having video that is stabilized in 4K out of a body like this is amazing. And I think that's another shot Sony took at how popular action cameras are, and seeing that people don't seem to care if the image or the field of view gets cropped in exchange for steady footage. And so they've done that. No camera until the Rx100 Mark VII has had active steady shot in 4K. So a step beyond traditional stabilization, yes, at the expense of losing some of what you would have had in frame, but certainly better to have than not at all. So, oh, and by the way, I didn't mention the 90 frames per second. That's something I have to test out. Yes, the camera actually will do 90 frames per second, but again, it's all about the 20 frames per second that it can do in burst mode without any blackout. That's something traditionally reserved for something like the Sony A9, which of course is a full frame camera aimed at professionals. So a lot to like here. Looking forward to getting this out. I didn't get it on time, but it's here now. I'm going to start using it. I'll be comparing it directly to both of these, of course, and letting all of you know whether or not I think the extra $100 is worth it over the Mark VI. But I can already tell you, based on the features and what I expect the performance to be, there's no way that I would direct anyone away from the 7 versus the 6 for a $100 price difference. Now, if you can find it for like a $400 price difference, different conversation. That pretty much rounds things out. A little bit better battery life, supposedly on paper. I'll find out when I start using it. But really excited, because this is the camera that can go everywhere with you. And yeah, you'll have to carry a lot of batteries, but it'll do it all. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.